Close your eyes and imagine stepping into a time machine, one that will carry you not across space but across time, back through the centuries, through the millennia, through millions upon millions of years. Feel yourself drifting backward through human history, past civilizations and ice ages, past the emergence of our species itself. Continue traveling back, past the age of mammals, past the extinction that changed everything, until you arrive in a world utterly transformed. Tonight, we embark on a peaceful journey to Earth as it existed during the Age of Dinosaurs, a span of time so vast it defies easy comprehension, stretching from about 252 million years ago to 66 million years ago. For 186 million years, dinosaurs ruled the Earth, inhabiting a planet that would seem both alien and achingly beautiful to our modern eyes. This was an Earth of supercontinents and shallow seas, of volcanic activity and drifting landmasses. The climate was warmer and more humid than today, with no permanent ice caps at the poles. Lush forests of unfamiliar plants covered vast regions, from giant ferns to towering conifers, creating ecosystems unlike any that exist in our modern world. Through this transformed landscape moved creatures of extraordinary diversity, from chicken-sized hunters to the largest land animals ever to walk the earth. Dinosaurs came in countless forms, some swift and agile, others massive and ponderous, some covered in scales, others adorned with feathers. They filled ecological niches from desert to swamp, from coastline to highland, adapting and evolving over countless generations. As we drift through this narrative, let yourself wander through these ancient landscapes. Feel the warmth of a Jurassic afternoon, hear the calls of creatures long extinct, watch as continents slowly shift beneath shallow seas. There's something profoundly calming about contemplating these vanished worlds, about understanding that Earth has worn many faces during its long history. The Age of Dinosaurs wasn't a single static era, but rather a vast sweep of time encompassing dramatic changes. Continents merged and split apart, sea levels rose and fell. Species appeared, flourished, and went extinct, replaced by new forms. Climate shifted from the harsh conditions following a mass extinction to the lush greenhouse world of the Mesozoic peak, before cooling again toward the era's end. So settle in, take a deep breath, and prepare to explore Earth as it was when dinosaurs walked beneath unfamiliar stars. Let the story of this lost world carry you into peaceful contemplation of deep time and planetary change. Our journey begins approximately 252 million years ago, at the dawn of the Triassic period, in the aftermath of the greatest extinction event in Earth's history. The Permian-Triassic extinction, occurring at the boundary between the Paleozoic and Mesozoic eras, had devastated life on Earth. Volcanic eruptions on a catastrophic scale had pumped carbon dioxide and toxic gases into the atmosphere, warming the planet and acidifying the oceans. More than 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species had perished. The Triassic world was one of recovery and renewal, but recovery from such devastation took time, millions of years. The early Triassic landscape appeared sparse and harsh compared to what would come later. Forests were thin, ecosystems simplified, biodiversity reduced to a fraction of its pre-extinction levels. The geography of the Triassic Earth was dramatically different from today. All major landmasses had merged into a single supercontinent called Pangaea, literally meaning all Earth. This massive landmass stretched from pole to pole, surrounded by the global ocean Panthalassa. A large embayment called the Tethys Sea cut into Pangaea's eastern side, creating a vast tropical gulf. Living on such a supercontinent had profound climatic effects. The interior regions, thousands of kilometers from any ocean, experienced extreme continental climate, scorching hot summers and bitterly cold winters, with minimal rainfall. The coasts enjoyed more moderate temperatures and regular precipitation, but the heart of Pangaea was a vast desert, one of the largest in Earth's history. Yet life persisted and gradually diversified. The survivors of the Great Extinction began to radiate into new forms, filling empty ecological niches. Among the most successful were the archosaurs, a group of reptiles that would eventually give rise to both dinosaurs and crocodilians. Early archosaurs were generally small to medium-sized predators, walking on four legs or sometimes rising on their hind legs to run. The first true dinosaurs appeared in the Middle to Late Triassic, around 230 million years ago. These early dinosaurs were small, agile creatures, mostly no larger than a dog or small deer. They walked upright on their hind legs, with their bodies balanced by long tails. This bipedal posture gave them advantages in speed and maneuverability over many of their competitors. Among these early dinosaurs were forms like Eoraptor, a primitive dinosaur about 1 meter long that showed characteristics of both the major dinosaur lineages that would later emerge. Herrerasaurus, slightly larger, was an early predator with sharp teeth and grasping hands. These creatures weren't yet dominant. They shared their world with many other reptile groups, including the massive dicynodonts, distant relatives of mammals, and various archosaur cousins. Plant life in the Triassic was dominated by conifers, ferns, and seed ferns. True flowering plants hadn't yet evolved. Instead, forests consisted of early conifers resembling modern monkey puzzle trees and Norfolk Island pines, along with cycads that looked somewhat like palms but reproduced through cones rather than flowers. Ferns carpeted the forest floor, and horsetails grew along waterways. The climate warmed considerably as the Triassic progressed. Early in the period, Earth had still been recovering from the extinction's environmental damage, but by the late Triassic, greenhouse conditions prevailed. Carbon dioxide levels were much higher than today, trapping heat and creating a warm, humid climate even at the poles. No ice caps existed, the polar regions were cool but not frozen, hosting forests of conifers adapted to the long polar night. In the oceans, life was also recovering. Early marine reptiles like nothosaurs and placodonts hunted in coastal waters. The first ichthyosaurs, dolphin-like reptiles adapted to fully aquatic life, appeared. Ammonites, relatives of modern squid and nautilus with coiled shells, diversified into many forms. Coral reefs began to rebuild after the extinction. But the Triassic world was approaching another transition. Around 201 million years ago, at the end of the Triassic period, Another mass extinction occurred, not as devastating as the Permian-Triassic event, but still significant. Volcanic activity associated with the breakup of Pangaea released massive amounts of greenhouse gases, causing climate change that many species couldn't survive. This Triassic-Jurassic extinction eliminated many of the competitors that had shared the landscape with early dinosaurs. Large crocodile-like predators disappeared. Many mammal-like reptile lineages went extinct. When the dust settled and the climate stabilized in the early Jurassic, dinosaurs found themselves with reduced competition and abundant opportunity. As you contemplate the Triassic world, imagine a landscape where all continents connect, where you could walk from modern-day North America to Africa to Antarctica without crossing an ocean. Imagine forests of unfamiliar plants beneath a sky with higher carbon dioxide, creating spectacular sunsets of orange and red. Imagine the early dinosaurs, still small and unspecialized, sharing their world with creatures that would soon vanish, unknowing that their lineage would soon inherit the Earth. The Jurassic period, spanning from about 201 to 145 million years ago, represents perhaps the most iconic era of the dinosaur age. This was when dinosaurs truly came into their own, diversifying into the classic forms that capture our imagination today. The name Jurassic comes from the Jura Mountains between France and Switzerland, where limestone deposits from this period were first studied. The early Jurassic world looked different from the Triassic. Pangaea had begun to split apart, though the breakup was still in its early stages. A rift formed between what would become North America and Africa, gradually widening to create the young Atlantic Ocean, though it remained much narrower than today. The Tethys Sea expanded as continents shifted. This continental fragmentation had important climatic effects. With more coastline and shallow seaways, the extreme continental climate of the Triassic interior moderated. Ocean currents could penetrate deeper into land masses. Rainfall increased in previously arid regions. The climate became more equable, still warm by modern standards, still without polar ice, but less extreme in its temperature variations. The vegetation of the Jurassic was lush and green. Forests of conifers, cycads, and tree ferns covered vast areas. Ginkgos, similar to the single species surviving today, were common. The understory featured ferns of many varieties, creating dense ground cover. In swampy areas, horsetails and primitive wetland plants flourished. The overall impression would be of a green world, though one lacking the colorful flowers we associate with modern forests. This abundant plant life supported increasingly large herbivores. The sauropods, the long-necked, long-tailed giants, underwent a dramatic radiation during the Jurassic. These remarkable animals developed body plans unlike anything before or since. They walked on 4 pillar-like legs, supporting bodies that could exceed 30 or even 50 tons. Their necks stretched many meters, allowing them to browse vegetation from ground level to high in the trees. Their tails extended behind as counterweights, sometimes terminating in whip-like tips. Diplodocus exemplified the classic sauropod form, relatively slender for its length, with a neck and tail that together could extend over 26 meters. Brachiosaurus took a different approach, with front legs longer than hind legs and a more upright neck posture, like a massive giraffe. Apatosaurus, formerly called Brontosaurus, a name recently reinstated for some species, was more robustly built, weighing perhaps 20 tons. These giants weren't invulnerable. Large theropods, the carnivorous dinosaurs, evolved to hunt them. Allosaurus, the apex predator of the late Jurassic in North America, stood about 3 meters tall at the hip and measured up to 9 meters long. It hunted with powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, grasping prey with 3-fingered hands bearing sharp claws. Whether Allosaurus hunted alone or in groups remains debated, but it successfully preyed on sauropods, possibly targeting juveniles or sick individuals. Not all dinosaurs were giants. The Jurassic also saw the evolution of small, agile forms. Compsognathus, known from fossils in Germany, was roughly chicken-sized and likely hunted insects and small vertebrates. Ornithomimosaurs, ostrich-like dinosaurs with toothless beaks, appeared and diversified, filling niches as omnivores and possibly insectivores. The Ornithischian dinosaurs, the bird-hipped group that includes many familiar herbivorous forms, diversified during the Jurassic. Stegosaurus, with its distinctive double row of plates along its back and spiked tail, appeared in the late Jurassic. These plates may have served for display and possibly thermoregulation, while the tail spikes, called thagomizers, provided defense against predators. Despite its impressive appearance, Stegosaurus had a brain the size of a walnut. Its actual intelligence was likely more sophisticated than this fact suggests, but it wasn't winning any cognitive competitions. In the skies above, pterosaurs soared. These flying reptiles, not dinosaurs but close relatives, had evolved powered flight by developing wings of skin stretched between enormously elongated fourth fingers and their bodies. Jurassic pterosaurs like Rhamphorhynchus had long tails and teeth, catching fish from shallow seas. Later, pterosaurs would become enormous, but most Jurassic forms were relatively modest in size. The oceans teemed with marine reptiles. Ichthyosaurs reached their peak diversity, with forms ranging from small coastal species to open ocean giants like Temnodontosaurus, with eyes the size of dinner plates for hunting in deep or murky water. Plesiosaurs appeared, with long necks and small heads, using flipper-like limbs to fly through the water. Pliosaurs, their short-necked relatives with massive heads and powerful jaws, hunted these waters as apex predators. True mammals existed during the Jurassic, but most were small nocturnal creatures occupying ecological niches that dinosaurs didn't dominate the nighttime, the burrows, the tree branches. The largest Jurassic mammals were probably no bigger than a modern cat, though they were highly successful at what they did with many diverse forms. One of the most significant evolutionary developments of the Jurassic was happening in the dinosaur lineage that would eventually lead to birds. Small theropods began developing features we now recognize as bird-like. Longer arms, more flexible wrists, and though direct evidence from the Jurassic is sparse, possibly primitive feathers. Archaeopteryx, found in late Jurassic limestone in Germany, shows the transition beautifully. Clearly a dinosaur with teeth and a long bony tail, yet with asymmetric flight feathers and wings. Whether it could actively fly or merely glided remains debated, but it demonstrates the dinosaur-bird connection. The world of the Jurassic was one of relative stability. Climate remained warm and equable. Sea levels were generally high, with shallow seaways covering parts of continents. Ecosystems were complex and mature. For millions of years, this green world persisted, with dinosaurs evolving into increasingly diverse forms, exploiting every available ecological opportunity. As you contemplate the Jurassic, imagine standing in a forest of towering conifers, their branches festooned with ferns and cycads. Hear the calls of pterosaurs overhead, the crash of a distant sauropod moving through the undergrowth. Feel the humid air, warm even at what would today be northern latitudes. This was Earth in its Jurassic glory, a world of giants and plenty, where dinosaurs reached their most iconic forms. The Cretaceous period, spanning from about 145 to 66 million years ago, was the longest period of the Mesozoic era and witnessed some of the most dramatic changes in Earth's history. It was during this time that the world as dinosaurs knew it transformed from a landscape resembling the Jurassic into something approaching modern continental configurations. It was also during the Cretaceous that flowering plants revolutionized terrestrial ecosystems, that dinosaurs reached their greatest diversity, and ultimately that the Age of Dinosaurs came to an end. The name Cretaceous derives from the Latin word for chalk, crat, referencing the extensive chalk deposits laid down in shallow seas. During this period, the same deposits that form the White Cliffs of Dover in England. The early Cretaceous saw the continuing breakup of Pangaea. South America separated from Africa, widening the Atlantic Ocean. India broke away from Antarctica, Australia, and began its long northward journey toward Asia. North America and Europe were still connected, but beginning to drift apart. By the end of the Cretaceous, the continents had achieved positions somewhat recognizable to modern eyes, though still quite different in details. This continental fragmentation created isolated land masses where unique dinosaur faunas could evolve. Species in North America differed from those in Asia or South America. This provincial isolation led to increased global diversity, with different continents hosting distinct assemblages of dinosaurs. Perhaps the most revolutionary change of the Cretaceous was the rise of angiosperms flowering plants. These remarkable plants first appeared in the fossil record in the early Cretaceous, possibly as early as 130 million years ago. At first, they were rare components of ecosystems still dominated by conifers, ferns, and cycads. But flowering plants possessed innovations that gave them competitive advantages. Flowers that could be pollinated by insects, leading to co-evolution with pollinator, fruits that could be dispersed by animals, and rapid growth rates. By the late Cretaceous, flowering plants had diversified extensively and had become dominant in many ecosystems. Early types included magnolias and plants related to modern water lilies. Later, forms resembling modern maples, oaks, and palms appeared. Grasses, which would become so important in later eras, hadn't yet evolved. But flowering plants transformed the appearance of Cretaceous landscapes, adding seasonal colors from flowers and fruits that hadn't existed in earlier periods. This floral revolution affected dinosaurs and other animals. new food sources became available. Co-evolution between plants and herbivores. Intensified plants developed new defenses like harder seeds, while herbivores evolved new ways to process these foods. The appearance of flowering plants may have contributed to the diversification of many dinosaur groups. The hadrosaurids, or duck-billed dinosaurs, became particularly successful in the late Cretaceous. These large herbivores, some exceeding 10 meters in length, possessed remarkable dental batteries, hundreds or even thousands of small teeth packed together, constantly replacing as they wore down. This allowed them to efficiently process the tough vegetation available, including the new flowering plants. Many hadrosaurs also bore elaborate head crests, hollow chambers connected to their nasal passages that may have functioned for visual display, sound production, or both. The ceratopsians, or horned dinosaurs, also flourished in the late Cretaceous, particularly in North America and Asia. These creatures, ranging from small early forms to massive late Cretaceous species, bore impressive facial horns and neck frills. Triceratops, one of the last and largest, weighed up to 10 tons and bore 2 long brow horns and a shorter nasal horn, along with a massive bony frill extending back from its skull. These features likely served both for defense and for display. Competing males may have locked horns, and the elaborate frills could signal health and status. The ankylosaurs, armored dinosaurs with bony plates embedded in their skin and often bearing tail clubs, became common in the late Cretaceous. Ankylosaurus itself, living at the very end of the Cretaceous, was built like a living tank, low to the ground, covered in armor, with a massive bony club at the tail's end that could deliver devastating blows to attackers. The theropods carnivorous dinosaurs reached their apex in the Cretaceous. Tyrannosaurs, which first appeared in the Jurassic as modest-sized predators, became the dominant large predators in late Cretaceous North America and Asia. Tyrannosaurus rex, the most famous dinosaur, lived right at the end of the Cretaceous. This magnificent predator stood about 4 meters tall at the hip, measured up to 12 meters long, and weighed perhaps 8 tons. Its skull was massive, up to 1.5 meters long, equipped with teeth the size of bananas, serrated like steak knives, capable of crushing bone. Its tiny arms have puzzled and amused people, but they were muscular and may have served for gripping prey or helping the animal rise from a resting position. Other late Cretaceous theropods included the dromaeosaurids, the raptors made famous by popular culture. Velociraptor itself, from late Cretaceous Mongolia, was turkey-sized, far smaller than its Hollywood depictions. It and its relatives bore an enlarged, sickle-shaped claw on the second toe of each foot, held off the ground while walking. These claws were likely used for gripping and stabbing prey. Evidence suggests these animals hunted in groups and may have been feathered, though direct feather evidence for Velociraptor specifically remains elusive. The largest predatory dinosaur discovered so far, Spinosaurus, lived in Cretaceous North Africa. This bizarre theropod possessed a massive sail on its back, formed by elongated vertebral spines, and a crocodile-like skull suited for catching fish. Recent evidence suggests it was semi-aquatic, spending much time in water, a unique lifestyle among known theropods. The late Cretaceous saw continued evolution of bird-like dinosaurs. True birds had by now diversified, with both primitive toothed forms and more advanced types. These birds shared the skies with pterosaurs, which reached their largest sizes during the Cretaceous. Quetzalcoatlus, living at the very end of the period, had a wingspan estimated at 10 to 11 meters, making it the largest known flying animal ever. Despite its enormous size, it probably weighed only about 200 to 250 kilograms, thanks to hollow bones and a lightweight build. The climate of the Cretaceous was generally warm, though it varied throughout the period. The early Cretaceous was somewhat cooler than the late Jurassic, with some evidence of seasonal ice at high latitudes. But the mid-Cretaceous saw a dramatic warming, creating what's called the Cretaceous thermal maximum about 90 to 92 million years ago. During this hot period, sea surface temperatures in the tropics may have exceeded 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and even Antarctic waters were temperate. Crocodilians lived north of the Arctic Circle. Sea levels during the Cretaceous were much higher than today, perhaps 100 to 200 meters higher at their peak. Shallow seas covered large portions of continents. The western interior seaway split North America from north to south, connecting the Arctic Ocean with the Gulf of Mexico. Europe was largely an archipelago of islands. These shallow seas were important marine habitats and left behind the chalk deposits that give the period its name. Marine life flourished in these warm seas. Giant marine reptiles ruled the oceans. Mosasaurs, relatives of modern monitor lizards, grew to 15 meters or more, hunting fish, ammonites, and other marine reptiles. Plesiosaurs and pliosaurs continued from the Jurassic. Enormous sea turtles, some with shells over 4 meters long, swam these waters. Ammonites reached their peak diversity, with thousands of species in shells ranging from tiny to over 2 meters in diameter. As the Cretaceous progressed, the climate gradually cooled from the thermal maximum, though it remained warmer than today. By the latest Cretaceous, temperatures had moderated considerably, though still no ice caps existed at the poles. As you contemplate the Cretaceous world, imagine forests bright with flowers, something the Earth had never known before. Imagine vast inland seas teeming with strange marine reptiles. Imagine the final dinosaur communities, tyrannosaurs and triceratops, hadrosaurs and ankylosaurs living out their existence unaware that their time was drawing to a close. The late Cretaceous represented dinosaurian life at its most diverse, its most specialized, adapted to climates from the Arctic to the equator. But change was coming. To truly understand Earth during the Age of Dinosaurs, we must appreciate how profoundly different the planet's climate and geography were compared to today. These differences weren't merely matters of which animals lived where, but fundamental transformations in how the Earth system operated. Throughout the Mesozoic era, carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were much higher than in recent geological time. Estimates vary, but CO2 concentrations were probably 3 to 5 times higher than pre-industrial levels, possibly even higher during certain periods. This elevated greenhouse gas content trapped heat, creating a warm global climate. The effects of this warmth were profound. No permanent ice caps existed at either pole throughout the dinosaur age. The Arctic and Antarctic regions were cool but not frozen. Forests of conifers and ferns grew at latitudes that today support only tundra or ice. Fossil evidence shows that dinosaurs lived within the Arctic Circle, enduring months of winter darkness but not the bitter cold we associate with polar regions today. Without polar ice caps, sea levels were much higher than today. During the Cretaceous peak, oceans stood perhaps 200 meters higher than at present. This inundated low-lying continental areas, creating vast, shallow seas. The Western Interior Seaway that split North America was one such feature. Others included seaways covering much of Europe, large areas of northern Africa, and parts of Australia. These shallow seas were important for several reasons. They moderated climate, bringing oceanic influences deep into continents. They served as highways for marine life migration and as habitats for diverse ecosystems. And they deposited the sediments that would become important fossil-bearing formations, preserving dinosaurs and other creatures for our discovery millions of years later. Ocean currents operated differently in the Mesozoic world. The configuration of continents affects how ocean currents flow, and with continents in different positions, currents took different paths. The absence of polar ice caps meant no cold polar currents flowing toward the equator as exists today. Instead, warm currents circulated more freely, helping to distribute heat globally and reducing the temperature gradient between equator and poles. Rainfall patterns differed as well. Computer models and geological evidence suggest that monsoons were more intense in some regions, driven by the larger continental masses and different ocean-land configurations. The interior of Pangaea during the Triassic was arid, but as the supercontinent fragmented, climates moderated. By the Jurassic and Cretaceous, most regions received adequate rainfall, supporting lush vegetation. The seasons existed. Of course, Earth's axial tilt caused seasonal variations in sunlight, but the seasonal contrast was less extreme than today in many regions. The high heat capacity of the warmer oceans and the absence of continental ice sheets meant that seasonal temperature swings were moderated. However, at high latitudes, the months of winter darkness and summer light created distinct seasons, and dinosaurs living there had to adapt to these cycles. Evidence suggests some dinosaurs migrated seasonally, much like modern caribou or wildebeest. Fossil deposits in Alaska show numerous species, including hadrosaurs and tyrannosaurids. These animals likely migrated southward during the darkest months and returned north for summer's abundant plant growth. The discovery of dinosaur nesting sites at high latitudes suggests some species remained year-round, though how they survived the winter darkness remains somewhat mysterious. Oxygen levels fluctuated during the Mesozoic. During parts of the Jurassic and Cretaceous, atmospheric oxygen may have been somewhat lower than today, perhaps 15–19% compared to today's 21%. This seems paradoxical given the large animals, but dinosaurs' respiratory systems were remarkably efficient. Birds, living dinosaurs, possess a flow-through lung system with air sacs, allowing continuous oxygen extraction. Non-avian dinosaurs likely had similar systems, enabling them to thrive even with lower oxygen levels. Volcanic activity was more intense during certain periods of the Mesozoic than today. The breakup of Pangaea involved massive rifting and volcanic eruptions. Large, igneous provinces, enormous outpourings of lava occurred several times during the era. These events released tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases, affecting climate. The end Triassic extinction was likely linked to volcanism associated with the rifting of Pangaea. The Cretaceous saw several large volcanic events, though their environmental impacts varied. The Mesozoic greenhouse climate had important biological implications. Ectothermic, cold-blooded reptiles today are limited to warm regions because they rely on environmental heat to maintain body temperature. But the warm Mesozoic climate allowed ectothermic reptiles to inhabit even high latitudes if they were indeed ectothermic. The question of dinosaur metabolism, whether they were warm-blooded, cold-blooded, or something in between, remains actively debated. Evidence suggests at least some dinosaurs had elevated metabolic rates compared to modern reptiles, which would have helped them thrive even in the relatively cooler, though still warm, high latitudes. The soil and weathering regimes differed in the Mesozoic. Without grass, which didn't evolve until late in dinosaur time and didn't become widespread until after, soils developed differently. Erosion patterns differed. Rivers and deltas functioned differently without the binding effect of grass roots. These differences affected where and how sediments were deposited, influencing which fossils would be preserved. Atmospheric composition beyond oxygen and carbon dioxide may have differed. Some researchers have suggested that methane levels might have been higher due to extensive wetlands and different microbial communities. The ratio of different isotopes in various elements has been studied in fossils and rocks, providing clues about past environmental conditions. Lightning may have been more frequent in the Mesozoic atmosphere due to higher humidity and different atmospheric chemistry. Forest fires, sparked by lightning or volcanism, were regular occurrences, creating a patchwork of different successional stages in ecosystems and opening areas for new growth. As you contemplate Earth's Mesozoic climate, imagine a fundamentally warmer world where winter means merely cooler and darker rather than frozen. Imagine forests growing where today ice sheets exist. Imagine shallow seas where now dry land stands. This was an Earth in a different climatic mode, operating under different rules, yet following the same physical laws that govern our planet today. Understanding this alien Earth helps us appreciate how dynamic our planet is, how changeable climate can be over geological time. While dinosaurs dominated the land, the oceans during the Mesozoic era were equally remarkable, hosting ecosystems utterly unlike today's marine world. These ancient seas were ruled not by whales and dolphins, but by air-breathing reptiles that had returned to the water, evolving remarkable adaptations for marine life. The Mesozoic oceans were warmer than modern seas, with temperatures that would feel bathwater warm in the tropics. The lack of polar ice caps meant even Arctic and Antarctic waters were temperate, allowing marine life to thrive at all latitudes. Sea levels were higher, creating vast, shallow continental seas that served as nurseries and feeding grounds for countless species. The ichthyosaurs, literally fish lizards, were among the most successful marine reptiles. These creatures had independently evolved a body shape remarkably similar to modern dolphins, a beautiful example of convergent evolution. Sleek and streamlined, ichthyosaurs propelled themselves with powerful tail flukes, using their flippers for steering. Their large eyes, in some species the size of dinner plates, suggest they dove deep or hunted in dim waters. Fossil evidence shows ichthyosaurs bore live young in the water. We have preserved fossils of mothers in the act of giving birth, with baby ichthyosaurs emerging tail first, just like modern whales and dolphins. These animals never needed to return to land. They breathed air through nostrils positioned near the tops of their snouts, surfacing periodically but otherwise living entirely aquatic lives. The plesiosaurs took a different approach to marine life. These creatures had barrel-shaped bodies, 4 large flippers, and came in 2 basic forms. The plesiosauroids had long necks, in some cases necks longer than their bodies, topped with relatively small heads. They flew through the water using their 4 flippers in a flying motion like sea turtles or penguins. Their long necks allowed them to dart their heads quickly to catch fish, while their bodies remained relatively stable. The pliosauroids, closely related to plesiosaurs, evolved massive heads and short necks. These were the apex predators of Mesozoic seas, some species growing to 12 meters or more in length. Liopleurodon and Kronosaurus possessed skulls 2 meters long, armed with conical teeth designed for gripping struggling prey. These creatures hunted other marine reptiles, large fish, and probably anything else they could catch. In the Cretaceous, a new group of marine reptiles emerged, the mosasaurs. These creatures were related to modern monitor lizards and snakes, having evolved from terrestrial ancestors that returned to the sea. Starting as small coastal lizards, mosasaurs quickly grew to enormous sizes. Tylosaurus and Mosasaurus reached 15 meters or more in length, with powerful jaws and teeth adapted for crushing ammonite shells and tearing flesh. Mosasaurs had a unique swimming style, undulating their bodies and using their tails to push through water, more like eels or sea snakes than the tail fluke propulsion of ichthyosaurs. Their limbs had evolved into flippers, though unlike ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, mosasaurs probably still laid eggs on land early in their evolution, only later evolving live birth. The oceans teemed with fish of many types. Sharks existed, including some species quite large, though the true monster sharks would come later, in the Cenozoic. Bony fish diversified throughout the Mesozoic, evolving into forms ancestral to many modern groups. Some, like Siphactinus, grew to frightening sizes. This predatory fish reached 6 meters long, with large fangs and aggressive disposition. Ammonites, shelled cephalopods related to modern nautilus, reached their peak diversity during the Mesozoic. These creatures came in sizes from tiny spiral shells smaller than a coin to giants like Parapuzosia, with shells over 2 meters in diameter. They swam by jet propulsion, squirting water through a tube, and hunted smaller animals with tentacles. Their coiled shells, when fossilized, are among the most beautiful and commonly found Mesozoic fossils. Marine turtles evolved during the Mesozoic, and some grew to enormous sizes. Archelon, living in the late Cretaceous seas that covered Kansas and neighboring areas, had a shell over 4 meters long and may have weighed over 2 tons. Like modern sea turtles, these creatures came ashore to lay eggs, digging nests in sandy beaches before returning to the sea. The Mesozoic seafloor hosted different communities than today. Coral reefs existed, though the corals were different species than modern reef builders. Sponges, bryozoans, and other filter feeders colonized the bottom. Mollusks of many varieties burrowed in sediment or attached to rocks. Crustaceans scuttled across the seafloor, much as they do today. The deep ocean of the Mesozoic remains largely mysterious. Deep-sea sediments are rarely preserved, and few fossils tell us about the abyssal plains. But we can infer that deep-water ecosystems existed, perhaps with their own specialized communities adapted to darkness and pressure, much like today's deep sea. The chemistry of Mesozoic oceans differed from modern seas. Higher atmospheric carbon dioxide dissolved in seawater, making the oceans more acidic than today, though not so acidic as to prevent shell-building organisms from thriving. The circulation patterns, driven by different temperature gradients and continental configurations, distributed nutrients and heat differently than modern ocean currents. Upwelling zones, where deep, nutrient-rich water rises to the surface, created areas of exceptional productivity. Coastal regions benefited from nutrient runoff from land. These productive waters supported dense populations of fish and invertebrates, which, in turn, supported the marine reptiles and other predators. The Mesozoic seas also hosted unique ecosystems in shallow inland seas. The Western Interior Seaway that split North America during the Cretaceous was essentially a new ocean connecting the Arctic to the Gulf of Mexico. This seaway hosted its own fauna: marine reptiles, fish, ammonites, and countless other organisms adapted to these unusual conditions. As you contemplate the Mesozoic oceans, imagine diving into warm, clear waters where ichthyosaurs swim past like dolphins, where plesiosaurs neck hunt for fish, where mosasaurs lurk as apex predators. Imagine seas covering areas now dry land, shallow waters teeming with ammonites and fish, giant turtles paddling slowly through tropical currents. These oceans were as rich and complex as the terrestrial ecosystems, completing the picture of Mesozoic Earth. To truly grasp what Earth was like during the Age of Dinosaurs, we must look beyond individual species to understand how ecosystems functioned, how organisms interacted, how energy flowed through food webs, how the daily rhythms of life played out. A Jurassic forest ecosystem might contain dozens or even hundreds of dinosaur species, along with countless other organisms. The foundation of any terrestrial ecosystem is its primary producers, the plants that capture solar energy through photosynthesis. In the Jurassic, these would be conifers, cycads, ferns, and ginkgos. These plants grew in vertical layers, towering conifers forming a canopy perhaps 30 to 40 meters high, smaller cycads and tree ferns forming a mid-story, and ground cover ferns carpeting the forest floor. Herbivorous dinosaurs exploited these different layers. Massive sauropods could browse the very tops of the tallest trees, areas inaccessible to smaller herbivores. Their long necks served as living cranes, reaching high into the canopy. Medium-sized ornithischians fed on mid-story vegetation, while smaller herbivores grazed on ferns and low-growing plants. This vertical stratification reduced competition. Different species could coexist by feeding at different heights. The herbivores, in turn, supported carnivores. Large theropods like Allosaurus preyed on large herbivores, possibly hunting in groups to bring down giant sauropods. Smaller theropods hunted smaller prey, early mammals, lizards, insects, and juveniles of larger species. Some theropods may have been scavengers, feeding on carcasses. The reality was probably mixed. Most predators are opportunistic, hunting when possible and scavenging when available. Insects were abundant and diverse during the dinosaur age. Cockroaches, beetles, flies, and many other groups existed. Dragonflies and damselflies hawked for prey over waterways, though they were smaller than their enormous Carboniferous ancestors. Termites and ants, which evolved in the Cretaceous, played important roles in decomposition and ecosystem engineering. Bees co-evolved with flowering plants in the Cretaceous, developing the pollination partnerships that continue today. Decomposers, bacteria, fungi, and various invertebrates broke down dead plant and animal material, recycling nutrients. Fungi may have been particularly important, as suggested by their role in modern ecosystems and evidence from fossilized wood showing fungal decay patterns similar to today. Freshwater ecosystems, rivers, lakes, and swamps hosted their own communities. Crocodilians, already ancient in dinosaur times, lurked in waterways. Turtles swam or basked on logs. Fish ranged from primitive forms to more modern types, with sharks and rays in coastal waters. Amphibians, frogs, salamanders, and some more primitive types inhabited moist environments, though they were less diverse than in earlier eras. Coastal ecosystems formed transition zones between land and sea. Estuaries and deltas hosted unique assemblages. Some dinosaurs, like Spinosaurus, appear to have been semi-aquatic, hunting fish. Pterosaurs were common along coasts. Many species specialized for fishing, diving from the air to snatch prey from the water's surface. Marine ecosystems during the Mesozoic were dominated by reptiles in ways unfamiliar today. Ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs filled roles now occupied by whales, dolphins, and seals. These reptiles had to breathe air, so they surfaced regularly, but they were otherwise fully adapted to marine life. Some boar live young in the water. We have fossil evidence of ichthyosaurs giving birth, while others may have come ashore to lay eggs. The food web in Mesozoic oceans started with phytoplankton, microscopic photosynthetic organisms. These were eaten by zooplankton and small fish, which in turn fed larger fish and marine reptiles. Ammonites were important at various trophic levels, with some species filter feeding on plankton and others hunting small prey. Belemnites, extinct relatives of squid, were abundant and important prey for many marine reptiles. The daily rhythm of life in dinosaur times followed the sun, as it does for most life on Earth. Diurnal dinosaurs rose with dawn, perhaps calling to establish territories or contact group members. Herbivores spent much of the day feeding. Maintaining a massive body requires enormous amounts of food. Sauropods may have eaten nearly continuously, processing hundreds of kilograms of vegetation daily. Predators were likely more intermittent feeders. A large theropod might gorge on a kill, consuming many kilograms of meat, then rest for days while digesting. Smaller predators probably fed more frequently on smaller prey. Evidence suggests some theropods were social, living in groups. Fossilized trackways sometimes show multiple individuals moving together, and some bone beds contain numerous individuals that apparently died together. Social behavior likely varied across species. Some dinosaurs may have been solitary except for mating. Others probably lived in herds for protection. Fossilized trackways show groups of sauropods moving together, with smaller juveniles in the center surrounded by larger adults. Some hadrosaurs had elaborate head crests that may have functioned for species recognition and social signaling, suggesting complex social structures. Nesting and parental care varied. Some dinosaurs, like the theropod oviraptor, brooded their eggs like modern birds, sitting on the nest to keep eggs warm. Others may have buried eggs in vegetation or warm soil, leaving them to incubate without direct parental involvement. Evidence of nesting colonies suggests some species nested in groups, perhaps for protection. Some dinosaur nests show evidence of multiple clutches, suggesting that parents returned to the same area year after year. The sounds of a Mesozoic ecosystem would have been quite different from today's. Hadrosaurs may have used their hollow crests to produce low-frequency calls, creating sounds that could travel long distances through forests. Tyrannosaurs might have roared or produced deep rumbles. Smaller dinosaurs probably vocalized as well, though what they sounded like is largely speculation. Bird-like dinosaurs may have produced bird-like sounds. Pterosaurs likely called to each other in flight. Night brought different life. Small mammals emerged from burrows to forage, largely avoiding dinosaurs through temporal niche partitioning. Nocturnal insects became active. Some small theropods may have hunted at night, using excellent night vision. The absence of large nocturnal predators, dinosaur eyes suggest most were diurnal, meant that night offered relative safety for small creatures. Seasonal changes brought behavioral shifts. In regions with distinct seasons, plants shed leaves or went dormant. Herbivores migrated to follow food, or switched to different food sources, or in some cases possibly entered a dormant state, though evidence for dinosaur hibernation or estivation is limited. Predators followed the herbivore migrations or shifted to different prey. Catastrophic events, storms, floods, volcanic eruptions, fires periodically disrupted ecosystems. Fossilized bone beds sometimes show mass mortality events, where many individuals died together, possibly drowning in floods or trapped by sudden climate shifts. These events, while devastating locally, created opportunities: new growth after fires, nutrients released from decaying bodies, open niches for survivors to exploit. As you contemplate these Mesozoic ecosystems, imagine the complex web of life, not so different in principle from modern ecosystems, yet composed of utterly different players. Imagine the daily dramas of predator and prey, of competition and cooperation, of feeding and breeding, playing out across millions of years, shaping and reshaping life in response to environmental change. After 186 million years of domination, the Age of Dinosaurs came to an abrupt and catastrophic end 66 million years ago. The cause of this extinction, known as the Cretaceous Paleogene (KPG) extinction event, was a massive asteroid impact, though the story is more complex than a single cause. The impactor was an asteroid or comet approximately 10 to 15 kilometers in diameter, traveling at tens of kilometers per second. It struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, creating the Chicxulub crater about 180 kilometers in diameter, one of the largest impact structures on Earth. The impact released energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs, perhaps 100 million megatons. The immediate effects were apocalyptic. A fireball expanded from the impact site, incinerating everything within hundreds of kilometers. Earthquakes of magnitude 10 or higher shook the planet. Mega tsunamis, hundreds of meters high, radiated outward through the Gulf of Mexico and beyond, inundating coastal regions around the Atlantic and Caribbean. But these immediate effects, devastating as they weren't the main killer. The impact threw enormous amounts of material into the atmosphere. Dust, ash, and vaporized rock darkened the skies globally. Within hours, ejecta material re-entering the atmosphere all over the planet heated the air, possibly igniting global wildfires. The heat pulse would have killed exposed organisms and set forests ablaze. Then came the darkness. Dust and soot blocked out the sun for months, possibly years. Photosynthesis ceased. Surface temperatures plummeted in what's called an impact winter. Plants died. Herbivores, deprived of food, starved. Carnivores, losing their prey, followed. The food web collapsed from the bottom up. Acid rain fell as vaporized rock reacted with water in the atmosphere. Sulfur released from the impact site, which struck sulfur-rich rocks, created sulfuric acid, further acidifying rain and oceans. The ocean surface cooled, disrupting marine food webs. Plankton, the foundation of ocean ecosystems, died in massive numbers. When sunlight finally returned and temperatures rebounded, they may have overshot normal levels. The impact released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide, both from vaporized rock and from global wildfires. This greenhouse effect caused rapid warming and impact summer following the impact winter. Climate swung wildly, stressing ecosystems already devastated. The extinction was selective but severe. Non-avian dinosaurs, every species, from the largest sauropods to the smallest raptors, vanished. Pterosaurs disappeared entirely. Marine reptiles, mosasaurs, plesiosaurs went extinct. Ammonites, which had survived multiple earlier extinctions, finally succumbed. Yet some groups survived. Birds, avian dinosaurs, made it through, though most lineages died out, and only a few groups survived into the Paleogene. Small mammals not only survived but soon diversified to fill niches left empty by dinosaurs. Crocodilians survived, as did many turtle species. Lizards and snakes survived, though with losses. Many fish species made it through. Insects generally survived well. What determined survival? Size was a factor. Few animals larger than about 25 kilograms survived. This makes sense. Large animals require more food, and with ecosystems collapsed, large animals starved. Small animals could survive on limited resources: seeds, insects, carrion, detritus. The ability to shelter also mattered. Animals that could burrow or hide in water had better chances. Crocodilians could retreat to rivers and reduce their metabolism, waiting out the crisis. Small mammals in burrows were protected from the heat pulse and could survive on stored seeds and roots. Dietary flexibility helped. Generalists that could eat many things had better odds than specialists. Birds that could eat seeds and insects as well as other foods survived. More specialized birds died out. Herbivores that could only eat specific plants, now dead, starved. Those that could switch to different foods had a chance. Geography played a role too. The impact was centered in what is now Central America, with the most intense immediate effects in North America. Evidence suggests Southern Hemisphere extinctions were somewhat less severe, though still catastrophic. Some regions may have served as refugia where organisms survived. Interestingly, the extinction wasn't the only stress at the end of the Cretaceous. The Deccan Traps in India were erupting massive volcanic eruptions that had been ongoing for hundreds of thousands of years, possibly millions. These eruptions released enormous amounts of lava and gases, possibly affecting climate even before the impact. Some scientists suggest these eruptions had already stressed ecosystems, making them more vulnerable to the impact. The combination of volcanic stress plus the impact may have been too much for ecosystems to handle. Some argue the volcanism alone might have caused a mass extinction eventually, while others maintain the impact was the primary driver. The truth likely involves both. A weakened biosphere hit by a catastrophic impact had little chance of survival. Recovery from the KPG extinction was slow. Ecosystems rebuilt over millions of years. The earliest Paleogene, the period following the Cretaceous, was dominated by ferns, which could quickly recolonize disturbed ground from spores. Gradually, other plants returned. Mammals, freed from competition with dinosaurs, began to diversify and increase in size. The world after the impact was fundamentally different. Dinosaurs, except for birds, were gone. The Mesozoic era had ended. The Cenozoic era, the age of mammals, had begun. Yet in many ways, the post-extinction world built on foundations laid in the Mesozoic. Flowering plants, which had arisen during the Cretaceous, went on to dominate terrestrial ecosystems. Birds, descended from theropod dinosaurs, radiated into diverse forms. Insects, adapted to flowering plants, continued their partnerships. As you contemplate the end of the dinosaur age, imagine that terrible day 66 million years ago, the sky lighting up as the impactor streaked through the atmosphere, the ground shaking, the sky darkening. Imagine the months and years that followed as ecosystems collapsed and species vanished. It was the end of a world, the extinction of creatures that had ruled Earth for 186 million years. Yet it was also a beginning, for without this catastrophe, mammals might never have had their chance, and we might never have evolved to contemplate these ancient events. As our journey through the Age of Dinosaurs draws to a gentle close, let us reflect on what this vanished world teaches us about Earth, about life, and about our place in the grand sweep of time. The dinosaurs dominated Earth for 186 million years, a span of time almost incomprehensible to human minds. Our species, Homo sapiens, has existed for perhaps 300,000 years. Recorded human history spans only about 5,000 years. If we compressed the entire age of dinosaurs into a single year, all of human history would occupy the last few hours of December 31st. This perspective humbles us, revealing our recent arrival on a planet with an immensely long history. Yet, despite this vast duration, the dinosaurs are gone. Every species that thrived during the Mesozoic, except for birds, has vanished. This reminds us that no reign lasts forever, that change is the only constant in Earth's history. Species arise, flourish, and go extinct. Ecosystems assemble and dissolve. Continents drift. Climate shifts. Life adapts or perishes. The Mesozoic world was so different from our own that it seems almost alien, yet it followed the same physical and biological laws that operate today. Photosynthesis captured solar energy. Herbivores converted plant matter into animal tissue. Carnivores hunted prey. Organisms competed, cooperated, reproduced, and died. The players were different, the stage was different, but the play was familiar. Understanding dinosaur-era Earth gives us perspective on our current climate and environmental changes. The Mesozoic greenhouse climate shows us what a hot Earth looks like: no ice caps, high sea levels, different weather patterns. As we face modern climate change, the geological past provides context. Earth has been both much warmer and much colder than today. Life has persisted through these changes, though not without losses. The KPG extinction reminds us that catastrophe can strike without warning. An asteroid, unlucky enough to hit Earth, ended an era. No amount of adaptation, no ecological dominance, no successful evolutionary history protected dinosaurs from this random event. It's a sobering reminder of our vulnerability. Earth orbits the Sun in a cosmic shooting gallery of asteroids and comets. Modern efforts to detect and track near-Earth objects stem from understanding this threat. Yet the extinction also demonstrates life's resilience. Not everything died. Survivors rebuilt ecosystems, filling empty niches with new forms. Life continued, changed but unbroken. This resilience gives hope. Even after the worst catastrophes, life finds ways forward. The study of dinosaurs has transformed in recent decades. Once seen as slow, dim-witted reptiles, dinosaurs are now understood as dynamic, often intelligent animals, many covered in feathers, some living in complex social groups. This revolution in understanding came from new fossils, new technologies, and new ways of thinking. It reminds us that science progresses, that our understanding deepens with continued investigation. Every dinosaur fossil tells a story of an individual animal that lived and died millions of years ago, whose remains were buried just right to be preserved, whose fossils happened to erode out where humans could find them. The odds against any particular individual becoming a fossil are astronomical. The ones we find are lottery winners, ambassadors from deep time, carrying messages about vanished worlds. These fossils connect us to deep time in intimate ways. You can touch a fossilized bone and know you're touching the actual remains of an animal that lived 100 million years ago. You can see the texture of fossilized skin, the serrations on fossilized teeth. These are not abstractions but physical connections to the past. As you drift toward sleep, let your mind wander through Mesozoic landscapes. Imagine forests of conifers and cycads, later joined by flowering plants. Imagine sauropods browsing treetops, hadrosaurs calling to each other with their hollow crests, tyrannosaurs stalking prey. Imagine pterosaurs soaring over shallow seas where marine reptiles hunted. Imagine the warmth, the unfamiliar constellations, the utterly transformed world. Think of the 186 million years of slow change, of evolution creating endless forms most beautiful. Think of continents drifting, mountains rising and eroding, seas advancing and retreating. Think of the countless generations of dinosaurs, each living its life unaware of the deep past or distant future, simply existing in its eternal present. And remember the end, the sudden catastrophe, the darkness and destruction, the extinction. But also remember what came after: renewal, diversification, the rise of new life forms. Endings enable beginnings. The extinction that ended the dinosaurs opened opportunities for mammals and eventually for us. We are the universe becoming conscious of itself, conscious enough to look back through deep time and reconstruct vanished worlds. Through science and imagination, we can visit the age of dinosaurs, walking in our minds through forests gone for 100 million years, watching through fossils and reconstructions, creatures that no human ever saw alive. The dinosaurs are gone, but they're not forgotten. They live in fossils, in reconstructions, in art and literature, and in our imaginations. They remind us that Earth is ancient, that life is diverse and adaptable, that time is deep, and that our moment on this planet, however brief, is part of a story that stretches back billions of years and will continue long after we're gone. Rest well, cosmic explorer. Dream of long-necked giants browsing Jurassic forests, of tyrannosaurs stalking late Cretaceous plains, of pterosaurs soaring over Tethys Sea. Dream of an Earth both alien and beautiful, both familiar in principle and strange in detail. Dream of deep time and planetary change, of extinction and renewal, of life's long, slow dance through the ages. May your dreams be filled with ancient wonders and Mesozoic mysteries, with creatures both terrible and magnificent, with the endless possibilities that deep time represents.